I'll record this one. All right, so what you're going to do for your assignment is you are going to do what's referred to as an argumentative PowerPoint presentation, which means it's it's not an essay. It's done on PowerPoint using bullet notes, but you're going to do it and sort of structure it like it's the same way you structure an argumentative essay. So it's argumentative PowerPoint presentation, strict and desire, and you're going to create a PowerPoint presentation answering the following question: is Blanche a victim? 5 to 6 quotes. What we're doing here is showing our understanding to read and understand the messages of strict and desire, to create information, to create gather information for a PowerPoint presentation, to create outlines and rough drafts, and using feedback to create an effective PowerPoint presentation, and eventually making sure you use the spelling and grammar, sentence paragraph structure to refine your PowerPoint presentation for evaluation. Right. When I'm marking the assignment, I'm looking for the following themes. I know what the term victim means, and we'll go over what the term victim means and how we're going to apply it here. I know that I must argue that Blanche is either a victim or that she's responsible for what has happened to her. That's the conversation point. When I'm meeting with you to discuss and break down your outlines, I'll ask you some questions about that. And I mean that for this assignment, while I understand things are more nuanced and life is not usually these binary decisions, for this assignment, I'm asking you to make a binary decision. Is she a victim or is she responsible for what happened to her? I know that my PowerPoint should use concise point from information rather than long sentences and paragraphs. That simply means that when you're doing your PowerPoint and you're heading it in, I know the natural tendency for people is to write things in sentences and paragraphs. PowerPoints don't do that, right? It's same information, but it's conveyed in sentence, I guess, for lack of a better term to call it something else. It's consisting of 10 to 12 words to convey the same ideas and information. And then my slides should be visually appealing and use appropriate images, which means if you're gonna, in your slides, you should follow a specific color code or template that you can get that when you create a PowerPoint. And that if you're gonna use images, they should be appropriate based upon a version of the play that you're referring to. So if you use images from the 1955 version with Marlon Brando, that's fine. If you're using images from the 1985 version, that's fine in your PowerPoint, but they should be consistent, which means choose a set of images if you decide to use images in your PowerPoint, choose a series of images from one version of Streetcar and stick to those images. I know that I have to prove my thesis statement by using evidence from the play, minimum of 4 quotes, which means to tell me there's a victim, you have to prove it using evidence from the play. And today, after I go through all this, I think I'm going to just review how to quote an MLA formatting, just so everyone knows what I mean by evidence and gathering evidence. I know my PowerPoint presentation should use proper spelling and grammar, right? So even though it's not a proper sentence, grammar and spelling should still apply. I know that when speaking, my voice should be clear and I should communicate in a way that's interesting and engaging. So part of this presentation is to present to me. Now, it doesn't have to be done live to me. You can record your voice and record yourself doing a presentation and sending it to me. But part of the aspect is that I need to read your slides and hear you talk about your slides. Okay. And the last part is the writing process. It means you have to have an outline, a rough draft, file draft. You come to me for feedback. I give you some feedback, you make the changes, and you go through that process, and you can evaluate on that as an observation. Okay, so let's continue on. Nope, that's the wrong one. Did everyone see this?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, so the goal of the assignment is to prove if Blanche is a victim or is she responsible for what happened to her. Use PowerPoint and all codes conventions assigned to it, and to use evidence from the entire play. Empirical research. When in empirical, we are treating the play as evidence not in dispute, right? Empirical research is statistical information, it's data-driven information. It's like if we talk about, let's say, COVID research, right? That some people say, well, you know what? When you take the COVID thing, you're going to grow wings, right? If you take the COVID vaccine, you're going to grow wings and fly away. And go, okay. Empirical research would be someone say, well, I'm going to go and I'm going to find out how many people have taken the COVID vaccine, and I'm going to track what happens to them after the COVID vaccine, if you take it for weeks on end. And then I'm going to record every single time there's some weird anomaly or condition that happens to people. That's empirical research. So when someone argues about how they feel about something, you would say, well, that's nice. Empirically speaking, here's the evidence that proves that I'm right. So we're treating the play as empirical, which means when something happens in the play, it's not in dispute. It is factual. That's what's going to happen. That's the source of our information. Okay, for step one is read the play to completion. So I know some of you read the play, watched the play, have a firm understanding of the play. It just simply means that you need to be able to have information that you have to understand the play in its entirety, because if you don't, then when you make statements about whether she's a victim or not, and and you pull evidence to support it, you won't be able to access the proper information to support your point. Okay, step two is gathering evidence research, right? So we need to find the word victim. So for this PowerPoint, we're using this specific definition of the word victim. I know there are many definitions of the word victim. We're using this one, right? This is what you're going to use, right? A person who is harmed or injured by a person, outside agency, or force beyond their control. That is what victim means. It is a person who is harmed or injured by a person, an outside agency, or force beyond their control. So that means if you're hurt by another individual, an outside agency, like a group, or some force, right? So if Kathy, you go out the street and someone comes to you and punches you in the face, that person, you're a victim. If you go outside in the street and the police pull you over and say, you know, I don't like girls with black hair, and they're gonna get arrested, you're a victim. That's an outside agency. If you go outside and you're walking on the street and a lightning bolt just hits you for no apparent reason, it's force beyond your control, right? Those are the aspects of being a victim. Part B was list actions that happen during the play. So I've listed with a group of students we did years ago, we listed all these things, right? Raped by Stanley, loses her job as a teacher, run of the town of Laurel, lost Bell Rev, sent to an institution, loses family, breaks up with Mitch. So the two things in yellow there are what I would say things that are her, based on what she did, right? She lost her job as a teacher, was not beyond her control. She had an affair with a student, that's her fault. Run out of town of Laurel, right? That's beyond her control, right? Now, granted, the morality of the situation, you can argue whether or not she should have known better to act more appropriately in the environment, but I mean, sorry, that's the actually argument you want to make. Like, sure, is it immoral that she lives by this code? Yes, but is she aware that if she behaves this way in Laurel, that she'll be punished for it? She's also aware of that as well, right? That's why, and also the fact that she doesn't tell anyone about this, knows that she knows that, hey, if I do this, I'm gonna get in trouble. Those are the two ones I would say definitely are, she prove that she is not a victim. Raped by Stanley, I would say, has to be in the category of she is a victim. Again, every year I've taught this book, someone wants to say, but Walid, you know, she kind of asked for it. And I would continue to argue the point, there at no time is any evidence that shows us that she has asked to be raped, right? Flirt is not a rape. If someone flirts with you, it doesn't mean they want to have sex with you, right? That's just not a reality, right? She has clearly and consistently said she doesn't like Stanley. She would never date a guy like Stanley. And in fact, the only person she shows any interest is Mitch, who is the opposite of Stanley in almost each and every way, right? Mitch is more like the men that she's used to and wants, right? Not Stanley. So she did nothing to do so. And even if Stanley's angered by her, even if she lies to Stanley, she does stuff, she does all these things. Stanley is a grown man and doesn't have to take the quote unquote bait, for lack of a better term, right? That does not, there's no justification for rape. No one can force you into, there's no justification for rape because someone is bothering you or someone is being overly sexualized towards you. Rape is rape, right? So I would say be careful with that, because every time someone has a conversation and we go back and forth, I always will say to them, okay, but she broke a bottle off and put it in his face and said, away from me. Why is that asking for it, right? And again, people confuse her flirtatious behavior, which again is more about her taking control of a situation than as a means of sexual behavior. And I think it's also something we need to pay attention to, because that has been the argument for people who've been raped, as long as they've been raped, that if a woman is raped, she somehow wanted it. That there's this perfect idea of the perfect victim, that rape is you running out of the bushes, your clothes torn, with some guy chasing you naked, you screaming, help, help, he's attacking me. And that does happen, but rape happens in many different ways. And it's not always like that idea of the perfect victim. Okay, spiel over. Back to what we're talking about. For each action, you must determine if the action was caused by an outside force or agency, victim, or by her own choices. For your action, ask yourself the following questions. What happened? Who caused the problem? Did Blanche cause the creation of the problem or encourage it? And find evidence from the play to prove your point. Evidence should be detailed, more than one sentence. So part C is a very important part you need to, I'm just going to highlight here for a second to draw your attention to it. Part C is a very important thing, like did Blanche cause the creation of the problem or encourage it? Again, some people, again, I'm going to use this to draw your attention to the fact that people say, well, the rape thing is, she did encourage it. Again, I point out, you can encourage assault, right? Didn't do anything other than what she does to everybody, which is be super sweet and flirtatious, right? That's not an invitation to be raped. So she doesn't encourage it, right? And you know, and the only person that she shows any sort of interest in was Mitch. And when Mitch tried to do something to her, how did she react?
Shocked.
Yeah, she screamed, rape, get away from me. Right, and Mitch ran. So clearly, this is not a woman who is just, oh, I want to have sex with everybody. When she doesn't want to, she lets you know, I don't want to do this. Right? And, you know, and was she a tease? No, that doesn't, she can do whatever she wants with her body. It's her body. So again, this is just me having this conversation because I've had this conversation with both men and young women who are arguing with me, but while she's asking for it, I'm like, nope. She's really not, right? And it is something I think in society we have to look at, the fact that we tend to wish to believe that even sexual assault, there's somehow the person who's being assaulted might have asked for it to happen. Okay. After you get all this information, create your thesis based upon the evidence gathered, right? So you can say she is a victim or she's not a victim, right? Because you're gonna look at all this stuff and let's say you figure, hey, you know what? Gathering my evidence, I think she's totally a victim, right? Then, okay, great. And you have your 3 points to support it. You can say she's not a victim, right? Gather 3 points to support it. All I would say is do not use evidence in the wrong category. So if you say she is a victim, then you can say raped by Stanley. That makes her a victim. But if you say she's not a victim and you say, well, she encouraged rape by Stanley, that destroys your point. Okay, so just be aware, while there are many, like I said, there are 7 things that happened to her, you only need 3 reasons to prove whatever side of the argument you decide to choose. Right? And I would just be wary of choosing the wrong reason to support the wrong statement of whether or not she's a victim or not. Okay, so what I've also done here is step 3 is writing parts is a structure, right? This is how you should break it down. Now, again, when stating this, I don't know why I said there was 3 reasons. This is just an idea of how to put together PowerPoint slides. If there are ways that you can convey the same information in more or less slides, that's fine. I merely do this because sometimes students get stuck on how they want the structure to be. This is a guide for you, so you have the information here. So the first slide is your title page. Second slide is introduction, which is a general topic, reason for supporting thesis, and thesis statement. Make sure they're also all in bullet point notes. Slides 3 to 5 is the first reason, right? That tells us she's a victim or not a victim, right? And you state, quote, explain, which I want to go over after this, just to get everyone to understand what that means. So you have your second reason that proves that she's a victim or not a victim, and you have a third reason. You choose one side or the other. You don't put down both information. If you say she's a victim, 3 reasons why she's a victim. Now, in more complicated essays, I always try to draw your attention to the fact that when you go reason 1, reason 2, reason 3, is not necessarily the basis of how you should structure it when it comes to the evidence that has the strongest reason, the second strongest reason, and the weakest reason. You should always work this way. When introducing your reasons or supports, you always start with the second strongest thing that proves your reason. You put in the middle your weakest point, and you end with the strongest point, right? It's the idea that you want to end, you're trying to convince the audience that you're right. So if one point isn't as strong as the other ones, you kind of put it in between the 2 really good points, right? And you end with the best point. It's just a way of organizing your thoughts, so people are more likely to support what you're saying.
Okay.
Conclusion, we say thesis, what you approved, discuss the importance of understanding what the term victim is. So part of the conclusion is, anytime we talk about conclusion, it's about taking the concept you've discussed in your book, in your whatever you're doing, your poster, your PowerPoint, your essay, and applying it to a larger world, right? Why is it important for us to understand what a victim is? And part of what I talked about with both of you is that, again, when you think about victims, we want victims to be perfect, right? That they can't have any blemishes. The victim has to be absolutely nothing wrong with them. And the aggressor has to be super violent, and that's how it's got to be. And if the victim does anything that falls out of the realm of what we think is perfect, then they're not a victim, right? So rape, sexual assault cases, every time we've heard it, there's always a response that, well, what did you do to start it, right? There was a football player who punched his fiance at the time, wife now, and knocked her out. And I remember there was a female reporter, and she says her problem was that when she heard it, her first response is, well, what does she do to make him hit her? Versus, well, wait a minute, why is a trained athlete hitting a person who he has 50 pounds of additional weight, right? So you're asking the victim to say, well, you must have done something to make this happen, versus that, well, why are you hitting somebody, right? Like, why? Because our ideology is that we think victims in this very glass bubble, versus that, hey, when someone harms you, you're a victim, and you don't necessarily have to be perfect. You are a victim. Some points, PowerPoints, presentations don't use long sentences and paragraphs. Use point from notes, visual appealing, have cue cards, which simply means that when you're presenting, don't worry about that, because that's what if you're presenting in person. It just means make sure that when you are presenting, the PowerPoints are small information that you have there that you expand upon when you're speaking, right? So if you think about media conferences like the Apple has, like, whatever it's called, the World Development Apple. When Apple ever releases a conference or releases a new product, right, you notice they have a PowerPoint slide going on in the background, and the person's talking about it, right? You kind of follow the same sort of structure where you're talking about it, but you're not reading it. You're just basically, you're allowing me to understand, okay, here's the basic information, but then you might expand upon it and talk more about it. So like, oh, I get it. So you have to kind of keep that in mind. Okay, are there any questions? Okay, so I'm gonna stop the share and I'm going to